Hello and welcome to Live in the Air at Epiphan. Welcome to today's show. My name is George. I am joined by my pilot, Dan. And today we are taking you on a little bit of a sightseeing trip around Ottawa from the air.
Hey, Iceman, how you doing today?
I am doing great. This is fantastic. It's nice to get out and enjoy the scenery. And Dan, I didn't even know you had your pilot's license. This is amazing.
I have my visual flight rules license, so and I'm qualified to land at the Carp Airport just outside of Ottawa, where I have a few reps. But if you look over my left shoulder right now, you're going to see out the left window of our cockpit. You're actually going to see the Rockcliffe Airport, which
Oh.
is where we'll be starting from today on the east side of Ottawa, near the Ottawa River. And George, let's just bank here to our left over the river, and you're going to
Mm.
get a great view of the Ottawa River and downtown Ottawa in just a moment through our front visor.
Oh yeah. No, this is great. This and the weather is just perfect today too. Definitely not at all raining and cloudy. Uh,
Yeah.
so obviously, not to spoil it a bit, but obviously we're running a little bit of a gag here today, and we wanted to have some fun with talking about different ways that you can live stream. So Dan, maybe let's talk a little bit about what the heck are we doing other than having a good time and kind of just enjoying how we want to try something, challenge ourselves to do something different.
Cameron, let's switch over to our flight view here, and you'll check it. You'll see what we're doing here. We're flying Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. This is the new, latest, greatest flight simulator from Microsoft, and it's an impressive technical demonstration in its own right. Um, it uses the Azure server to actually stream this um, landscape data in real time using all kinds of satellite imagery in the Microsoft maps. So you can actually have, this is actually a scale representation of the entire planet. It's really quite fantastic. And actually, if you see here, we're just flying over downtown Ottawa right now. You'll see Lower
Mm.
Town underneath us. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at here, George?
Well, I'm gonna have to, look out the window here a little bit. Uh, no, it's yeah. So the fun part about this and the way that this is rendered is that because it's using all those maps, right? Unlike back in the day, the way Flight Simulator used to be, where it was like basically just a blank, flat planet, right? Because it's using mapping data, which most mapping data includes 3D elements these days, especially in urban areas. You get the buildings, you get a lot of detail. So when you do something like this in Flight Simulator, flying through a place like Ottawa, it's like, in some ways, it is kind of like flying over the real thing. You can see the different landmarks, you can see the different streets, and if you're local to it, then some of it makes sense to you. Some of the area Dan's flying over right now, you know, essentially is a couple years ago. Dan and Matt and I tried to live stream our ride for Dad motorcycle ride through downtown Ottawa, and so we're kind of covering that same similar area, to basically see it virtually from the air this time. But it is really interesting. Downtown Ottawa is an amazing place, even virtually. But in person, it's even better. Obviously, there's the Parliament buildings and other areas, but just as a downtown area, it's very nice. So
Yeah, and if you look out the left window here, we can actually see the Parliament buildings and the locks and the Chateau Laurier.
yeah,
So just a beautiful setting here on the Ottawa River.
yeah.
And
If you look at the Ottawa subreddit r/Ottawa, and if you check that every morning, you will see large numbers of threads of people posting sunset photos from those locks. So there's yeah. But at a suggestion of one of my colleagues, I'm going to change my glasses because hot tip, polarized glasses and monitors don't like to play nice together. So now I can actually see something, not not flying blind. If we were in a real plane, the polarized glasses would be a great idea. But for staring at a monitor, this is pretty terrible. Uh, so now I can actually kind of see a little bit of what Dan's actually doing. But we had to stick with the gag, you know. It was a great piece.
Thanks, George. Why don't we jump right into our lowdown, Cameron?
Yeah. So one of the other things that Dan you were showing off there, I think when we were inside the cockpit, there was a view we had from inside the cockpit where when you were saying look over your shoulder, it showed you looking. It was basically your POV.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing that? Like, you're flying the plane, but you're also controlling a POV of that?
Yeah, Cameron, why don't we switch back to the POV shot here? And you'll notice as I turn my head in real time, we can look at out the windows of the plane. We can get down in here into, some of the console and the flight navigation controls.
But you're not doing that manually, are you?
No, no, we're actually just using some video AI. Actually, this is a face tracking technology called AI Track. It's an open source, and I'll just drag it over here so you can see. It's just mapping my facial data in real time, and it's tracking my jawline and my mouth and my eyes, and it's actually sending that over my local network into an open tracking software that feeds that data into Microsoft Flight Simulator. So the result is that it creates kind of an immersive experience where I can control some of what's happening in the simulator just using, AI facial tracking.
Right. So this is something could be used in other things too. Like I think you've experimented with Adobe Character Animator with this a little bit as well.
Absolutely. I know Cameron likes to use the character animator to create an avatar, which could be really a cool way to do some advanced animation. We're also expecting to see like similar technologies deployed with a lot of the new VR headsets
Hmm.
as well, where there will be some. I'm sure we'll get into it later in the rundown, but
Yeah.
things like eye tracking as well. Here we're doing
Yeah.
face tracking, but eye tracking could be quite useful as well in many applications.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that, all these tracking, all these AI things to, it was a little hard to see in that application there, but it's if you've ever looked at behind the scenes shots of how they do motion tracking in like Hollywood movies, right? They put dots all over and these suits. It's kind of similar idea, right? It's virtually putting dots to track elements of your face. All of that could be in the future embedded into cameras to do better tracking, auto tracking on cameras, like PTZ cameras and things like that.
Yeah.
They're pretty good at general motion tracking, but they don't quite get that fine a detail yet. But certainly they could in the future as these simplified AIs improve, which is really exciting, I think. And there's a lot of applications for it, and a lot of possible technologies that will improve for the general public, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be interesting when we start seeing cameras, for instance, that can focus on what the human eye might focus on.
Right.
There's a lot of interesting applications, and I'm sure we'll start to see more and more of them. Previously, like you mentioned, we needed tracking markers to be able to
Yeah.
do this well, but the AI is so strong now that I don't have to put tracking markers on. In previous iterations of even VR, you had to use IR trackers to get
Yeah.
good motion capture. Now that's really not even necessary, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And eventually I expect to see, applications for this in space.
Yeah,
There's my segue.
there's been some space stuff happening recently, George. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been happening over at SpaceX?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone probably saw news about this, about Inspiration 4 launch. This was a week ago, but this was really exciting stuff because for me, there's a few things here. First of all, this was sort of the first flight with non-professional astronauts, right? These are people from the public who the four individuals were just citizens, public people, not trained astronauts on this flight. Um, And for me, watching it was incredible. And we're watching some clips here from the YouTube channel Everyday Astronaut, which, if you're interested in anything to do with space, rocketry, I highly recommend his channel. It's awesome. He covers a lot of these launches that mainstream media doesn't, and he does it in a much different way. So he will do a full write up like this, talking about all the stats of what Inspiration 4 was, and any other flights that he covers. And this is a bit nerdy, but this is really exciting because we're pushing the boundaries of, on the one hand, of space, sending non-professional astronauts to orbit for 3 days and do all of that. When you look at some of the stats of what this particular flight also had, first private crewed, first space flight destined, not destined for the space station, for in a long time. First crewed flight with 3 times a booster used 3 times. Right, this is one of SpaceX's big things. Right, is reusing the boosters. Right, first one with Dragon using a cupola, which we'll get to more in a second. First time, the 3 different Dragon modules will be in space at the same time. So 2 Crew Dragons and a Cargo Dragon were in space at the same time. This is the highest human flight since 1999 in terms of orbit. So, when some of the other billionaires talk about their space journeys, they weren't really in space. This was real space. And so there's a bunch of amazing stats here that's really pushing the envelope. And part of what makes this exciting to me, other than just being generally a nerd about this stuff, is that, the fact that private individuals without a ton of training can do this speaks to the technology. And of course, Dragon's designed to be mostly autonomous, means that a lot of technologies, kind of tying it back to all these AI things, all these other abilities to look at what people are doing, make a lot of this stuff easier so that, the general public can participate in things that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise been a part of. Now, not only was this a private crew, this was technically a private funded flight, which is also pretty impressive. This gentleman, Jared, is the one who paid for this flight. And essentially he's a tech billionaire, so he's got the money.
He can afford it.
Yeah, but he didn't want to just pay for it. He also was doing a charity tie-in for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which is the largest children's hospital in the United States. And his goal was to raise $200 million. Fort St. Jude's attached to this mission to basically leverage the hype and the energy around what was happening with this flight. So certainly, if this is something that's important to you, one of the people on the crew currently works at St. Jude's, but was also a patient of St. Jude's, a child who survived cancer and a number of other things as a child because of St. Jude's, and has now had the opportunity to add publicity to give back. So there's a lot of great tie-ins here. So if you're interested in getting involved there, you obviously can. You can find the St. Jude's donation page pretty easily. I'm sure they hit their goal, because I even saw in a tweet that Elon Musk himself was going to contribute $50 million. So 50 million of 200 is pretty good percentage. But again, he's got the money. But ultimately, what did they achieve? Well, they actually did run some scientific stuff, but I think what they achieved most was probably this. This is going to be the worst thumbnail to start on in the history of videos. But what did they achieve? Well, this is a shot from inside Crew Dragon and the cupola that they opened. And this is the largest contiguous pane of glass that has ever been used in space. So it is the clearest view outside of a spacecraft in human history. And it's absolutely incredible. But look at it. This guy's shooting it on his phone. We were talking before. It's like back in the day, I'd have all these fancy specialized cameras and all this.
Yeah.
He's just got his iPhone out.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of the, astronauts, the Hatfields of the world, they actually are really accomplished photographers.
Yeah.
It's surprising how many of them are camera nerds as well. And that has,
exactly. But the views out of this thing are just stunning. So if you're into that sort of stuff, highly recommend you check it out. This was posted by one of the crew on Twitter, and there's a lot of those things, so you can obviously check that out. But
Speaking of stunning views, we're just right over here in the flight now. We're right over Britannia Beach area,
Oh
which
yeah.
is, I think this is your neck of the woods here,
Getting a little
George.
closer. We have a colleague who lives practically on Britannia Beach, which is I'm very jealous of often. But yeah, that's a great spot to go during the summer. There's one of the best burgers you can get in Ottawa on Britannia Beach, Baja Burger Shack. For those of you who don't know, highly recommend. But it's a great park, great space, great beach to just kind of hang out and relax. And yeah, it's not too far away from where I'm located. But yeah, there's some fun stuff around there. But which direction are we heading now? Oh, it looks like you're at the 417, 416 junction there.
We are. So if you
Oh,
follow
yeah,
this highway south, that's going to take you down to Cornwall. This way will take you, well, you can get to Toronto that way. But
eventually.
the main event here is, we're cruising in this Cessna about 2,000 feet right over a neighborhood known as Bell's Corners. And if you look just over the left wingtip here, you'll see a big building that looks like an E. That was my high school, Bell High School in Bell's Corners, my old stomping ground.
Hmm.
And here we see Robertson Road, which is like Robertson Road, the main business district. But this is right in your neck of the woods. Why don't you tell us
It
about
is.
what goes on in Bell's Corners? Can we see Mort's Pizza? That's what I want to know.
That'll be a hard one. That's a small spot to see from the air, but a great place to go and eat. Bell's Corners is actually one of the oldest communities in Ottawa. It's been around for a long, long time, and there's still a few of the original buildings left. One of which is an Indian restaurant, which is fantastic. But it was a crossroads between places, so it still is in a lot of ways. It's like a small town located inside the city, but also outside the city, since it's surrounded by the green belt that you see represented here in the flight. There's just trees everywhere. That's the green belt that surrounds the community, and there are the longest network of trails through that green belt of anywhere in the city. So it's a great place to live if you're an outdoor rec fan. But yeah, it's a fantastic area, and I enjoy being here. And it's only 10 minutes from the office, so
Well, maybe we'll have to fly by the office on our next
yeah.
pit stop here. But first, I know there's some more news about an Apple keynote that's happening. Is it next week?
It already happened,
Oh,
basically. But there were some other problems. So they announced a whole bunch of stuff, but then they also ran into a whole bunch of other problems like security. And this is not only affecting iPhones. I recently saw yesterday there's also a Mac OS flaw that's recently been coming out. So there's a whole bunch of Apple security issues. Actually, we've tagged this to talk about this stuff. And so much has happened since we put this in there in regards to Apple, including today when the EU finally put down their ruling that all phones must have USB-C chargers, which means Apple's proprietary nature can go out the window.
wow.
And that's legally mandated. They won't have a choice. There was the whole lawsuit between them and Epic Games. And they've also recently said that, Fortnite will not be coming back to the iPhone no matter what. Uh, so there's all this crazy stuff, but there's a lot going on. And it's funny because usually this time of year, the biggest news is talking about the latest Apple product and not all of the security problems or lawsuits or all the other legal trouble. It's usually about the hardware. But it wasn't this year. Like this article is focusing on the security stuff because the hardware was kind of nothing. It was iterative. It wasn't really anything great. I saw a great meme of the like, what's new with the, or it was a meme of the iPhone designer looking at the old iPhone 12, trying to decide what to do with the iPhone 13. And he just took one of the camera lenses and moved it so that it was on an angle instead of straight up and down. It was like, boom, perfect. Because that's essentially what happened. So it's interesting. I mean, this is a company that is pushing the envelope quite a bit, but as companies grow and as they push envelopes, other things happen like security stuff. So I don't want to pick on them too much. I'm not an Apple fan myself, as we've covered many times on this program. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to deal with all that news, even bad news, all in one shot, really
Yeah.
coming from them.
How did they do their keynote? Was there any audience in attendance, or was it a
No, it was
hybrid
it was
production?
hybrid. It was hybrid, which was interesting, right? Because, and I think, we'll get to this in a kind of our next couple of pieces here, but hybrid's kind of a big deal. And to be fair, they've always done hybrid, right? Like they've always done these live streams where the general public is not in attendance; they're just watching online. And this year, I think, was even more so. There was a little bit of, press, but primarily they really did a full hybrid and even some virtualized aspects of the event. Kind of like we're playing with in some ways, where they kind of tried to create this immersive experience, and create this more enhanced hybrid experience, which I give them credit for. And visually looked amazing, but I don't know. I'd have to see how people actually feel about that.
Everyone always looks to Apple for, how to do a product launch. So it's
Yeah.
always interesting to see what
Well, exactly.
trends.
And they went in an interesting way, like I say, to really try and enhance that hybrid experience. So if that's the way they see things going forward, who's next to follow suit?
Um, Speaking of, some interesting product launches, a couple weeks ago we talked about Zoom Horizons, which is
Well, we talked about Facebook.
right, Facebook Horizons, which is like the
Facebook
VR
Horizons. Yeah.
workplace. But is there something else going on with that? Something about Zoom?
Yeah, so Zoom's basically jumping in on board with them and adding the ability to put basically whiteboards into those workspace crazy thing. So you take the Facebook, as this author said, put it, dystopian hellscape. Uh, but in this virtualized environment that uses the Facebook Oculus headsets, and Zoom is allowing you to basically add the Zoom whiteboard feature from Zoom meetings into this virtualized space. And so I think we'll start to see a lot more tie-ins. This was one of the things that was announced at Zoomtopia last week. To be honest, this was the most talked about thing because the rest of it wasn't that impressive. Um, but this is interesting. I mean, I'm still not. We don't need to go into the whole rant again like we did last time, but I'm still not into this. This is still not my jam. These avatars don't even have legs. You know,
Yeah, but they do have face tracking now. So,
they do.
the idea is to be able to map your actual facial expressions onto your avatar. And there's rumors that next month Facebook will announce Oculus Quest Pro, which will be
Right.
their third Quest device, and that it will have, facial tracking and eye tracking technology built in, as well as foveated rendering capabilities, which
Right.
can really enhance the VR experience.
Which is all great and cool. One of my biggest complaints and rants about this whole thing was that, even a Quest 2, which is the cheapest real VR headset you can get, is like $500, $600. So what's a Quest Pro going to cost? $1,000, $1,200, $1,500? And that, I'm sorry, but these are huge barriers to entry to to provide something that honestly I don't think is that valuable yet or look very good. It would be different if we were talking about Flight Simulator in VR, the way it looks versus this workspace stuff.
No, that's a good point. Um, well, speaking of innovation, we're actually flying over Innovation Drive
Ooh,
right now
yes.
here in the neighborhood of Kanata North, which is actually right by the Epiphan office. So if you look under here is Innovation Drive, and just up ahead, we will soon be able to see the Epiphan building
Yeah, this is going to be hard to
right
spot.
right here along March Road. If you look at this building sort of dead ahead, it's about a 4-story building. And we'll try to do a close pass by here.
You just crash right into it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
all
what's this
virtual.
Misha's office on the corner here.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get in nice and close.
Take a peek here.
And there it is right there
There it is.
on our
Yeah,
left.
right on the wingtip. So the question is, did they render in our sign that's on the outside of the building? I don't
Yeah,
think
I
so.
guess whatever the last satellite image would have been was our sign there, because we did get a new sign last year. But the parking lot's looking pretty full. I
Yeah,
don't
so
know if
this
that's
must be
very
pre.
realistic.
They're never that full these days, so this must be pre-March 2020. Uh,
And here
yes.
we're about to fly over the Marshes Golf Course as well. You'll see
Yeah.
that
And the Brook
just on
Street
our right.
Hotel there
Brook
just
Street
in front of you.
Hotel. I think I'm stalling the engine. I gotta add
It's
some power
actually,
here.
yeah, which those buildings just beside the Brook Street is where the original Epiphan offices were located.
Yeah, I guess it was one of these. Was it
Well,
one of
you're
these
familiar with those
555
buildings.
Legates?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's that one there just to the right as you're about to kind of tip the wing into it. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, that was a nice building actually. It's pretty good spot. But yeah, But one of the things we wanted to touch on, as we're hybrid touring here, is hybrid events. We touched on the Apple thing a little bit. Another kind of hybrid thing that it maybe won't be hybrid, because I think everyone is going to be left to figure it out on their own. I'm sure everyone has seen by now that NAB, which was supposed to happen in 2 weeks, has been canceled completely. It's probably started with a bit of a domino effect of some large exhibitors dropping out, and then eventually they canceled the entire thing, which is sad. We were certainly hoping to be there, but conditions as they are, they are. NAB themselves have not really announced anything to go in place of it, other than maybe we'll see you in April, which is when NAB is normally held. So we'll see what happens. I know we were trying and very excited about working with some friends to try to bring some virtual experiences from the show, but obviously that's all put to the side for now. The next question is, there's other shows that are lined up for the next couple of months as well. What happens to those? There were some great jokes on Reddit that I'm not going to read out, but if you're interested, the video engineering subreddit is a great place to see lots of information. But there were some commenters in there that had some great jokes about how you can achieve a virtual experience of being at NAB, and it involved, just being heavily intoxicated and having people invade your space. And that's the experience. Boom, right there. So it's a bit sad, but we'll see what happens in the future. And certainly we all hope that, come April, we can get back to these in-person events. In the meantime, stay tuned to all the Epiphan channels for all the things we are going to be doing through the fall to bring you information that we may have been talking about at those trade shows.
Yeah, for us, it just means that we'll have to have more of our own virtual event to sort of make up the gap. So expect to hear more about that soon.
Like virtually flying a plane. No problem.
Exactly. And actually right now we are just flying over, I think that's Lockmarch Golf Course, where I used to work as a younger man. I would cut the greens at this golf course early in the morning. Beautiful location here, right in the Marsh Highlands. And directly ahead, you'll see a little village on the ridge here. That is the Carp Village, where I'm located. And over my left here, you might just be able to see the Carp Airport.
You're not going to give us a tour of the Carp Dump? Come on. I'm sure it stands out like a sore thumb on the map.
I think it should be called the Stittsville Dump, because it's actually much closer to Stittsville. We're nestled away here. We don't have to, experience that even as much as some Kanata residents do. But
well, I'm going to dive into our chat a little bit, and because I think some of it's going to lead into us talking a little bit more behind the scenes about what we're actually playing with and all the different pieces we had to put into play here to make today's fun virtual flight work. Earlier on, our friend Tim Traub was mentioning polarized glasses don't work so great for pilots either. I agree, it's hit and miss for me on when I wear them on the motorcycle, whether or not my digital dash shows up properly at the right angle. But who cares? You just go as fast as you want. We had one person, Fareed Khan, was just saying fly to Toronto in our virtual tour.
Well, in this,
that would take a while.
In this Cessna, we might be in for a very long flight.
Yeah, might have to refuel. And then Sanoga, our friend from Uganda, was just saying a lot of switching on Pearl 2. Yes, you are correct. Cameron is going crazy in the background, trying to manage all of this and do the switching on Pearl 2. And then he also asked, how are we inputting the YouTube comments? So because we're using a Pearl 2, we're actually using NDI to bring in those titles and comments from a system called Singular Live. Now, we're also using NDI for a bunch of other stuff to bring in some of this as well. So all in all, we're using a combination of Zoom, NDI, SRT, chroma keying. Did I miss any? And is that it?
Alpha channel NDI as well for graphics.
Right. Yeah. So there's there's a lot going on here. We're pushing it pretty hard. And ultimately, at the end of the day, all of this is being done remote. Dan is in his home studio remote. I'm in my home studio remote. Cameron is in his home command center. And all of this is being funneled into a Pearl 2 that's sitting in our office that we flew over, and Cameron's remotely controlling everything. No one
And
is
there,
sitting there.
and there we see the behind the scenes view of a live shot of the Epiphan office
Exactly. Very quiet.
where a single Pearl 2 is powering this whole show. I actually have a Pearl 2 on my desk today. Ordinarily I would have a Pearl Mini, but wanted to play with that a little bit. Oh, Cameron's turning the lights on
Oh
now.
yeah, yeah. It's
Now he's
yeah,
just flexing on his
yeah. On his remote control
command
capabilities,
center capabilities.
just flex.
Cameron, do we want to show a behind the scenes shot of our studios, like Sans Key? Did we set that up? I can't remember.
Yeah, we'll try and pull that up. But while we do that, there might be a great question here for the general experts at large, and I guess that includes me and Dan and Cameron. But our great friend Kim was just first on holiday, lucky, in a place that my aunt, who loves to go, but also had a question for the experts. How do I most easily get an iPhone feed into a Pearl? So there's a few things there. You can get HDMI output adapters for iPhones and iPads. So that's the easiest physical way to do it is buy the Apple authorized Lightning to HDMI accessory. You could also, depending on the Pearl you're using, use stream methods like NDI. If you load an app that can output NDI, you might have to pay for those. And then you could bring that into a Pearl 2. But if you want to use something like a Pearl Mini or a Pearl Nano, doing it over an HDMI wire would be the best way to do that. And just getting the Apple accessory is the simplest way to do it, unless you can think of another way, Dan.
Well, here's an idea that I think would work with the Pearl 2 is why don't you install the Zoom app on your iPhone? You can share screen from your Zoom app and then map that to an NDI output if you have a Zoom room. And
yeah, you could do that as well. Yeah.
That is, one wireless way that you could do it. You would need a Zoom room in a Pearl 2. So maybe the easiest path to success is to just pick up an HDMI cable, like George suggested.
Yeah, I think it depends on your workflow. Like, what do you need from it, really? Like, what are you trying to show from the iPhone on there? That can obviously change which workflows can be the best. We did have another question here from our friend Sonoga, who just had any ideas about motion graphics for Pearls. He did a little bit of a hacky input with a hyperdeck, and it worked well. Yeah, that's a pretty common, simple, easy, basic way to do it is something like a hyperdeck or a computer that's running whatever graphics you might need and just piping those in over an input. Again, we can do it a little bit, even our pre-roll bumper and some other things, we can do that through titling software because we're using a Pearl 2 with NDI, so it makes it much easier to ingest those things. So there are a few different ways of doing it. You just need to look at which Pearl you might be using and what your other technology might be to help you bring that in. But there are a few different ways to do it, and the way you did it, Snoga, is definitely a very common one. But yeah, there's some options there. So Dan, how's our flight going? Where are we at now?
Let's take a look here. I'm just cruising over the West Carleton area.
Oh yeah,
We're kind of off into farmland just about.
Doesn't take long.
What I might try to do here is line us up for a landing at the Carp Airport you see ahead.
All right.
But before we do that, there's a couple things we wanted to touch on in the kitchen. Should we pop over?
Yeah. Well, while we're coming in for a landing, we'll head into the kitchen once we're on the ground. No, we'll just do it now. There's a couple of things that we want to talk about in Epiphan News, which is what we always chat about in the kitchen. The first one is we have a webinar coming up next week that we're pretty excited about, and that is all about how to build the ultimate on-premise video studio for your business. So I'm actually pretty excited about this one. It's going to have a lot of great information in there. We're going to have one of our wonderful hosts who doesn't do a lot of these webinars participating, which I'm pretty excited about. And the main objective here is we want to talk about, understanding some of those production fundamentals, looking at key workflows, how Pearls can help you within that context. So if you want to sign up to this, check out the website, epiphan.com/webinars. You'll see all the webinars listed there, including this one. You can register, and then hopefully we will see you next Wednesday to talk about video studios and how they can change the world.
Ooh, I like that. Also, we have another thing to check in on, and it's the Streaming Media Awards, which happens every
Yes.
year.
Yeah.
And as usual, Epiphan has a nomination in there. Can you tell us about what got nominated and how people can vote for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Streaming Media Awards are something that Streaming Media Magazine does annually, as Dan mentioned, and you can find streamingmedia.com/readers choice, and you'll have all these different categories, and one of them you'll find. I believe it was under here, or was it one of the other ones? I have to find it here. Um, there was
It was
no,
Video
I was in the
Mixer,
wrong.
right?
Yeah, sorry, I was in the wrong box here. So we're nominated under the category for video mixer more than $1,500. You'll find the Pearl Mini nominated there. So we would really appreciate it if the army of Epiphan Live fans headed over there and voted for us, along with other great Epiphan friends and partners in some of these other categories. You know, there's things about cameras there. Feel free to vote for guys like PTZ Optics or Bird Dog, who have always joined us for various different content things, or really anything. There, you know, also just pick what you think is the best.
Yeah.
There's some great things
Well,
here.
we might
So
get some ideas too. Streaming media has, a lot of great content as well.
yeah, I mean, even if you don't end up voting for any of these things, I find it fun to run through these and be like, oh yeah, cellular bonding solutions. Like, who other people think is the best, and
Mhm.
see who's nominated there to get an idea of who I should maybe go consider. So that's actually how I use these awards, is shopping.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Figure out what other people are talking about, like, you know, who's in the PTZ network controlled camera section, right? And obviously the usual suspects: Sony, Panasonic, PTZ Optics, Bird Dog, all those. You know, look at all those pieces. So I see some slight cheating here, double nomination. But anyway, there's some great things in here, so check that out. We would really appreciate that if you vote for us in that category, and maybe we'll win. And if we do, we will let you know on this show at some point in the future.
Well, George, let's land the plane here. We're coming in for a landing at the Carp Airport. I think this is runway 9. I have to figure out how
Perfect.
to lower my flaps on this Cessna. I think there's a button here. Let's hope I get it. And there we go.
And
Reduce airspeed and elevation.
just while you bring us in for a landing there, I'm going to answer Kim's last question here in chat. Is there an update for Pearl 2 around the corner? Depends on what you mean. We're always releasing firmware updates for the Pearl family of products, including Pearl 2, and we definitely have some updates that we have planned towards the end of the year, through the fall and into the end of the year for all Pearl models. Um, so, oh God, Dan, oh good.
Hey,
Uh,
that was not such a bad landing
uh,
after all. Let's apply some brakes here.
but yeah, Kim, keep an eye on obviously where you always do, right? Like, follow, subscribe on all the social places for Epiphan: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all the places, and keep informed with what we're working on next. And of course, I mentioned the webinar next week. We do these live shows every 2 weeks, bi-weekly now. So that'll be the following week for the next live show. We hope to see you then. And I hope you enjoyed our flight around Ottawa and a little bit of a peek of how you can experiment with different kinds of content to just enjoy it, virtualize it, make it hybrid, have fun.
That was a lot of fun today. And thanks for the guided tour of Ottawa, George. It's great having you as my co pilot, as
Yeah,
always.
this is great.
And yeah, I guess we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye now.